What's up, y'all? Welcome to the first episode of our new series where we will be interviewing various people that work in sports. Our first ever interview is with Jared Sandler. Jared Sandler is a radio play-by-play broadcaster and pregame and postgame host for the Texas Rangers, a sports talk host at 105.3 The Fan, a TV play-by-play for Fox Sports Southwest. He also has his own YouTube channel.
So what made you decide to become a sports broadcaster?
Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. It probably goes back to growing up. I grew up in a family that was very sports centric. I am the youngest of three. My brothers are 10 and 12 years older than I am. So, needless to say, they had a decent amount of influence on what I did at those stages of my life early on. But it was never like I was forced into sports. I loved it. That's what I want to do. Maybe more I think of it, maybe I pushed them to be like all sports all the time because that's what I wanted. So sports is kind of what I knew early on. It developed into a passion, and then from that into like a burning passion where it became more than just being a sports fan. I really started to believe in the impact of sports and the way sports fit into society and stuff like that. And so when like a lot of people in my industry, when our playing days are up, you kind of think, all right, well, I like this sports stuff, so what's my place, where can I fit in? And the first thing I thought about was journalism, and went to college at USC with the idea that I wanted to give that side of it a try. And I've been fortunate to never really have to change course. I've been able to trick enough people to give me jobs and to let me keep doing this. And so that's been a real treat and a real treasure. But it really it goes back to just developing a love for sports early on, and then giving the broadcasting thing a shot, and putting my best foot forward and really kind of attacking it, and approaching it the same way I approached playing sports. Putting in a lot of work and breaking down film, and trying to figure out how I can improve on a daily basis. And that's a process that I have not forgotten or pushed to the side. It's something I still do every single day, and hopefully it's what's going to allow me to continue to broadcast for as long as I want to have a professional career, because it's something I love, and I couldn't see myself doing anything other than what I'm doing now.
You mentioned the impact of sports. Do you recall a certain impact when you were growing up, or maybe it was in your professional career that just.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first time it really hit me, and then I could probably retroactively go back and recognize things that maybe I was too young to notice as they were unfolding, but was 9/11. And I was just old enough to really have a lot of memories of 9/11. I was 11 years old at the time, 12 years old at the time. And so what I remember about it, and that was, I think I was alive for like the Oklahoma City bombing, stuff like that. But like that was, I mean, that was unparalleled, what happened, and the devastation and the shock and the way that, that this country and really parts of the world pressed the pause button was surreal. And as best as I recalled at that time, that was the first time that like sports had just been put on hold. I mean, it was just like, we don't care. A lot of times, for instance, like the Boston Marathon bombing, as like tragic as that was, it's not like the whole country shut down. For this, the whole country shut down. And I remember when sports started to I guess unfold and get back kind of into its rhythm, there was a way more patriotic feel to the environments, whether it was in New York, the Northeast, closer to, the point of impact, or even on the West Coast. It seemed like the national anthem came with a little more pride, and people would run out with the flag, which wasn't as much of a thing. And some of that stuff is maintained. Other parts of that has waned a bit. But what really struck me was that was also at the height, the best modern years of the Yankees Red Sox rivalry. And those teams hated each other. Now there's a rivalry, I guess, but the Red Sox and Yankees rivalry is way, way more gentle than it was then. And the Red Sox right now aren't good enough for it to be like a strong rivalry. they were both really good, fighting for the same thing, players that did not like one another. I mean, it was must see TV. And I remember, obviously, because New York was, such a, not that, the whole country was impacted, but New York more than any other city or state. And I remember Red Sox fans, the next time those two teams played against one another, had, shirts. The I Love New York shirt was like I guess, a popular shirt back then. I don't know if people still wear them, but they had shirts that said "We love New York," and it just, like, I get chills even relaying this to you, thinking about uh, how Red Sox fans at the height of this incredibly intense and passionate rivalry, that as much as we can say, hey, at the end of the day it's a game and rivalries are fun, unfortunately there are people who carry rivalries out beyond just the game, and they go and they start fights in the parking lot, or this or that, or things are said, or gosh, that guy's a Red Sox fan, what a what, or this guy's a Eagles fan, whatever. Like, these rivalries, some people take them far, but you could see that this was bigger than that. And then, a month and a half later, when the Yankees were in the World Series and President Bush threw out the first pitch, just the roar of the crowd, and politics aside, like, it didn't matter. Like, this was the president of our country, the leader of the United States of America. And unfortunately, I think we're a little more divided right now. But that was a time where everyone was, even if just for a snapshot, together. And then you see, after Hurricane Katrina, the impact the Saints had, after the Boston Marathon bombings, the impact the Red Sox had. And it just, and COVID, what were people saying? We need sports as a distraction, or thank gosh for sports to distract me from this. And whether it's on a big level like that or a minor level, maybe like I've had a bad day. The country's fine, but I've had a bad day. But I got to look forward to this sporting event at night that just distracts me for 2-3 hours. I just think sports has a way to impact society on a large scale and a small scale, the way that few other activities have the ability to do.
So, how long have you been in the business of journalism, as you mentioned?
Well, I guess professionally since 2011. That was, well, I take that back. I did some stuff when I was in college at USC. I really started in 2007, my freshman year at USC, when I got the chance to start broadcasting USC sporting events, beginning with football in that fall and volleyball, and then basketball and baseball, and getting to do some water polo and soccer, and even did some roller hockey then. And that's where I got my start. Then got to do some stuff for ESPN radio at 710 AM in LA, and then did some stuff in Brainerd, Minnesota, in the Northwoods League after my junior and senior, or in between my junior and senior years of college. Had some internships prior to that at the Ticket in Dallas, and with the Texas Rangers. But then professionally, post college, real life job. The first job I had was in the summer of 2011 for the Great Falls Voyagers, a minor league baseball team, a part of the Chicago White Sox system. So I guess since 2011, if you consider a college athlete's college career is, the amateur side, and they go pro, the minute they sign that contract and college is in the rear view mirror, that would be for me 2011, that first job after graduating in Montana.
What is your favorite broadcasting moment that you've been a part of?
Ooh, there are probably a few. The first one that jumps out to me is July 7th, 2015. That's the date of the first ever Major League Baseball game I got to broadcast in a play-by-play capacity. I joined the Rangers that year to do the pre and post, with the idea that I would be the fill-in on the play-by-play side. And that was always a dream, not just, doing play-by-play for one of the major sports at the highest level. Baseball had been the sport that I'd probably dedicated the most time to, not as much by choice as just the way that it kind of worked out. But being able to do it for my favorite team, my hometown team, was special. And years before, when my dad was driving me to that aforementioned opportunity in Brainerd, Minnesota, we were making the drive from Los Angeles to Brainerd after I after I wrapped up my junior year of college. He picked me up in LA instead of driving to Dallas. We went to Minnesota, and he gave me a book by Jim Nantz called Always by My Side, which is about Jim Nantz's career and also talked about his relationship with his dad and how the uh, second, I guess, part of his dad's life, he kind of dedicated to bringing him to all these places and events that he got to broadcast: the Super Bowl, the Masters, the Final Four, etc. And I finished the book and I looked at my dad and I kind of made an empty promise of if I ever get to broadcast a major league game, I want you right next to me for that first game. And uh, thankfully, the Rangers allowed me to fulfill that dream, that promise. They didn't give me that game for that reason, but when I knew that I was getting that game, I asked them if it would be possible for my dad to be up there for that game, and he was. And my dad's meant a ton to me. He's sacrificed so much to give me opportunities that I otherwise wouldn't have. It wasn't always easy. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon. We didn't, money was a daily concern, and I know a lot of my dad's choices, even if I didn't realize it then, were geared towards my brothers and me, and not for whatever would have been best for him necessarily. And it's something I'll never forget. And I'm really glad that I got to share that moment. I know it was a special moment for him, which means a ton to me, but it was also a really special moment for me. Not only to be able to that was my major league debut. I never got the chance to do it as a player, so that was my major league debut, and to be able to share that with my dad was incredibly special.
So, how can now going from your first moment and now it's 5 years? Can you describe how COVID affected your ability to broadcast games? As that was during the time during spring training, correct?
Yeah, so I was actually watching the Mavs game with some buddies. It was a Wednesday night, and in Arizona, we don't get the Mavs games locally. So it was a nationally televised game. We didn't have to go to a sports bar to watch it. We could watch it at our house where they put us up, and all of a sudden they come back and like breaking news, and the NBA season getting shut down for the time being. And so we knew at that point, like, if important NBA games are going to be put on pause, meaningless spring training baseball games certainly aren't going to proceed. And lo and behold, that was the case. Obviously, now when we left, we didn't know. I remember leaving Arizona thinking, well, maybe we won't open the season in Seattle. Maybe we'll play it at a neutral site, because Seattle was like the epicenter of COVID at that time. I don't think any of us, when we got on the plane to go back to Dallas, had any real idea that it would be months before we would play, and that the possibility of not playing was going to be a legitimate option. It was pretty soon after that we realized the magnitude of it, but I think we were just learning like everyone else. And so it was definitely weird, April and May, months where I'm usually never home, never seeing family or my wife. I'm like here, and I don't know what to do. I don't have anywhere to go. Obviously, the lack of sports was surreal, and then the return of sports was surreal because it included so many elements that were never before part of our sports viewing experience. From the baseball side, it was obviously incredibly odd broadcasting games inside a cavernous new stadium at Globe Life Field with no fans. Also just the fact that it was the first year of the ballpark, and it didn't really get debuted ceremoniously. But the biggest oddity was I wasn't even in the same room as my broadcast partners. I had my own booth, and my broadcast partner, for that given night had his own booth. And not seeing the players, the coaches, front office people, not having those face-to-face interactions, the off-the-cuff conversations. I mean, that's a big part of our job. That's a big part of how you develop relationships and glean the information that helps separate our level of understanding and information from the fans, is so that we can bring them stuff that is interesting to them, that they're not able to just gather from watching the games on TV. A lot of that was stripped away, obviously doing a lot of stuff on Zoom, and then when the team was on the road, having to broadcast games off of a monitor, which in some ways was not that different, because for me, that's how I practice. Like any kid or even someone in my shoes, you want reps, there's a game on TV, you turn the sound down and you practice. So I had experience broadcasting games off a monitor before, but it's still in this circumstance, in this environment, was definitely different. And so having to adjust to all of that stuff was quite the experience. It's not I think at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to make the best out of whatever the situation is. And it totally made sense why the situation was what it was. We certainly hope that, it's the only year in which that's going to be the case, not being able to travel, not being able to have that time to really learn about people, about the game, to have those conversations. That's not only a really enjoyable part, but I think it's an essential part of what allows us to be the best, do the best job that we can. And stripped away from us. And hopefully we're able to get that back. But, obviously more importantly, we get that back because the world's back in a better place. So I think for all sports, 2020 was a broadcasting experience unlike any other. Hopefully 2021 starts to gravitate back to the norm.
In your life, what opportunities were created because of the stoppage of sports?
Well, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, our engineer for the Rangers broadcast got COVID. I don't know whether or not he gave it to one of my broadcast partners, Matt Hicks, but Matt Hicks got COVID, and then Eric Nadel, our other partner, just because of his age, decided to kind of to step away, for cautionary reasons. So at that point, I was the last man standing. I had tested negative. I felt comfortable. I was young. I am young, so I didn't feel like I was as at risk. And so I guess for me, the opportunity, I don't really like to use that word because I just feel wrong that it came at the expense of the health of people that mean a lot to me. But I did get a broadcast Rangers games as the primary broadcaster. And it's one of those things where you always hear the cliche of you never know when you're going to get that opportunity and you better be ready for it. I mean, I never could have predicted that. And I did my best to be ready for it. And, I think it definitely was something that people were going to notice one way or the other. I either was going to crash and burn, and they were going to notice, man, he's not ready for that level of growth, or maybe they were going to say, hey, but he handled that seamlessly. And I don't know what people's opinions of that was, but that was definitely a significant opportunity that otherwise probably would not have been there. Doing play by play is not unusual, but to be the lead voice, I mean, that's not something I'd ever been in my time with the Rangers, because I'm either filling in for Eric or Matt. When I fill in for Eric, Matt's the lead voice. When I fill in for Matt, Eric remains the lead voice. So to be the lead guy was a different experience, and one that I'm not going to patronize people and ignore the fact that it was an opportunity, but it's something that I don't necessarily choose to celebrate because, again, I mean, even though Matt and Ted and Eric all are okay now and Eric remained healthy throughout, it was not an easy experience for Matt and Ted, and we were certainly worried about them at various points throughout it. And so it's tough to enjoy that experience knowing that, again, it came at the expense of the health of people with whom I'm very close.
Well, we're very glad they're healthy now. And now you mentioned how you had to be in a different booth than your partner. I think that's a lot. People are different with being spaced out from others. How did that different booth interact with your partner?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, whether people realize this or not, a lot of the chemistry in the moment, the what allows us to feed off one another is the ability to make eye contact and to gesture. People can't see that maybe I'm putting my hand up to tell Matt or okay, I got something on this. Don't change the subject. Or when I'm looking straight ahead at the action, that maybe is going to tell them something different than if I'm turning to make eye contact with them. That's telling them, hey, let's engage on this more. I got some thoughts on this. Let's carry on this conversation. When you don't see, like, not only were we not in the same booth, I couldn't see them just because of the structure and the architecture of the booth. So, I didn't have that ability. And so there's going to be a little more stepping on toes because of it, or maybe not recognizing that my broadcast partner had something to say on a topic when I was the play-by-play guy, and instead I kind of moved on. So there was maybe a little more, hey, back to that, Jared, you're saying earlier, which, typically it's not the, hey, back to that. It's, you're organically and appropriately timed having those conversations. The other challenge is that until Eric was comfortable coming back, after 2 weeks of quarantining. The partners I had, with the exception of David Murphy, with whom I had worked on the TV side before, I never done play by play. I never had a play by play color dynamic with them, and so you're developing just that general chemistry, in addition to the fact that you can't see one another, and then just little things like uh, talking to them in between innings. We had the ability to over headset, but like I didn't know if he was going to run to the bathroom. I mean, there were times when, I'd say something and I didn't realize Steve Buechele had gone to the bathroom, or just simply taking his headset off. Just because you want to take your headset off for a minute in between innings after a 20-minute, arduous inning. So it's just little things like that again, I hope the listener didn't notice, but certainly in that position, you certainly did notice uh, that that you didn't have the same opportunities because you weren't in the same booth.
Staying on the Rangers side, what storyline for the Rangers are you most looking forward to this upcoming season?
I just think unfortunately the Rangers are not in a position where you're asking yourself the question of is this the year they win a World Series, and the goal is to get back to that point where they're contenders. That's just not where they are right now. So a lot of the focus this year is on the development and the young guys, and so I think that the storylines, as much as we'd rather them be about who's the big piece they're going to get at the deadline to put them over the top to win a World Series, it's which of these guys are going to be a part of the conversation when the Rangers are back in a position to compete. Is Leody Taveras the real deal in center field? Is Sam Huff going to be able to hit enough at this level? When Josh Young comes up, how good and how ready is he, and what role can he fill? Will Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, be good enough offensively to be, an everyday player over the course of 162 games? I think that answering those questions are going to be important for the organization. And I think that process, as long as you have the right expectation going into the season, I think that process can be a really, really enjoyable process, because you're going to have young guys who are going to be competing their asses off. You're not going to have as many disgruntled older guys who, their abilities are slipping away, and they're trying to come to terms with that. And you got the young guys who are knocking on the door, but the old guys are playing a game of tug of war, not wanting to give up the rope. Now you got young guys who are going to play their tails off, fighting to show that they belong. And I think there's an energy and a joy to that. But at the same time, this is not a team that's going to win 90 games. This is a team that very likely could lose 90 games. And so there are going to be some frustrating moments, some rough games, some rough stretches, some streakiness. And I think as long as you go into the season with the understanding of what this season is, what it's about, and what the realistic expectations are, there's some fun. There's some fun that you can draw from it. And I think a lot of that's going to be about the young guys and watching their development.
Well, we cannot say how grateful we are for this interview, and it's great. And so, thank you for joining us, Jared. And we would also like to thank everyone for listening to our first ever interview. If you would like to hear more from Jared Sandler, you can follow him on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. He also has his own YouTube channel, so make sure to go give him a listen and subscribe. Can you give us your Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook names for the
Yeah,
people listening?
yeah. So Facebook is just my name, Jared Sandler. Twitter is Jared Sandler, no space. Instagram is Jared Sandler _. Someone nabbed Jared Sandler on Instagram, so I got the Jared Sandler _.
Well, I know I do follow you on Twitter, and you have great insights, not just on baseball, but on the Cowboys and basketball as the Mavs played tonight. So please make sure, for the people listening, please make sure to check back in for the future from Outsiders Opinions. We have videos other than this, but we wish everyone a happy holidays.